Good evening and welcome to tonight's Embracing Diversity discussion, where we have a panel topic discussing crossing the line, sexual harassment in the workplace. Tonight's conversation is hosted by Reverend Vicki L. Hughes, DEI facilitator and consultant.
Good evening. This is, again, Embracing Diversity. We are an online, bi-weekly diversity initiative. We dialogue about different topics pertaining to race and other issues related to diversity. They fall under the diversity realm: race, age, gender, sex, sexual orientation. So tonight we're going to be talking about a different topic other than race. And the topic is crossing the line, harassment in the workplace. And we have decided to hone in and really talk about sexual harassment that's in the forefront of the news right now. Our dialogues, just to give you a little background, if you are just joining us, we started last June. There have been different groups of panelists on, and our dialogues are designed to serve as a model to whoever views, whether you are an individual or you represent a corporation. We are models of just everyday people dialoguing, engaging in difficult conversations about race and other issues. So you've heard tonight's topic. So let's get started. Just to start this off, and then I'll turn it over to pose a question to my panel. We've all heard of the recent allegations, sexual harassment allegations, specifically against Governor Andrew Cuomo. He's just the latest of a string of people who have gotten gotten in trouble for this very thing over the last 10 years or so. There seem to have been quite a few people who have different allegations have come to the surface. So as of today, I Googled earlier, as of today, a total of 6 women have come forward alleging that Governor Andrew Cuomo has committed these sexual acts against them, engaged in unwanted touching, saying inappropriate comments. They have said things like unwanted hugging, inappropriate touching, asking for that woman to kiss him, or if he could kiss that woman, asking if a woman has an employee has a boyfriend, very inappropriate things. So one thing I wanted to say is, while I was researching sexual harassment, is that the alleged harasser, so in this case, Governor Andrew Cuomo has been accused of these things. The alleged harasser does not get to decide if his or her conduct was appropriate in all of these alleged incidents. Governor Cuomo keeps asserting that his behavior was appropriate. Sometimes when we see him on the news, he's apologizing for making his accusers feel uncomfortable, is the word he's using. He now understands that his sensitivities have changed, and that he's learned from this new revelation, I guess. He's learned his lesson, is what he's saying. So again, he's just the latest of a string of people being accused. So I wanted to also say that, let's see, some of the other people who have been accused, I wrote down some names: Matt Lauer, Tom Brokaw, the now U.S. Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. I want to say that my first exposure to a highly publicized sexual harassment scenario was during the hearing for U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, and I believe that was in 1990 something. I can't remember the exact year, maybe 1991, 1992. So he, during his hearings, when he was about to be confirmed to become a Supreme Court Justice, Anita Hill is the woman who stepped forward and accused him of some inappropriate sexual behavior and words and actions. So let's get started. That was just my short introduction, but I want to engage my panelists. I want to pose a question first to get us started. So my question is, if we are thinking about the accusers of, the alleging that these alleged harassers performed these acts, said these things to them, what are your thoughts on women or men actually coming forward with workplace harassment charges, specifically sexual harassment, years later after the incidents happened? I mean, sometimes we're hearing about the incidents happening, 8 years ago, 20 years ago. What are you all's thoughts on that? Let me start with, this is my mother. We call her Mother Evelyn. If you would respond to that, what do you think about women or men coming forward years later?
My thinking is that we are being educated in terms of what is happening. Therefore, we look back and think, well, that was not appropriate. At the time that it happened, you didn't know if this was prevalent or didn't know anything about it actually, to any extent. Therefore, you didn't think that you could address it in any way. So now we have heard so much about the workplace harassment. Therefore, you decide, in my opinion, that, well, mine was harassment and I need to address this, and this person shouldn't get away with the behavior that was a part of the workplace. So it's the time that we are in now versus the past. Many times, the people who were the bosses and so forth tended to joke around, is the best way I can say it from my generation. Therefore, it wasn't considered serious in terms of inappropriate behavior. It was just a part of what was going on. So it's a different time now in that many individuals have let everyone know what has been going on. And it's a situation where you can lose your job or whatever, and some people choose to just take that chance because it is important. So that's the way I see it as an older person who came along when no one was talking about what was going on at work. You just put up with it if it was going on. And I come back to the business of many times the joking around or the comic part of the day was just normal.
Okay, with you saying that, I wanted to pose another question to you, Mother Evelyn. So you're a retired educator. When you were teaching in the elementary school where you taught, when those jokes came up, did anybody respond to the jokes, or did any? It sounds like you're saying people just put up with it, but did people join in, or did they respond in any way?
Well, the bottom line is this, and it's probably going to seem impossible, but I don't recall any instances where there was anything that would be considered harassment, sexual harassment in the workplace. Now, remember, I was a teacher. So in 3 instances, my principal was a man, but I didn't experience anything that was inappropriate. And I don't remember anybody saying anything about things that might or might not have happened. But remember the time if someone was being addressed inappropriately, it was just normal. No one said anything about it. I wish that I knew if there was something going on at my school. In fact, the one man was a retired Army person, and he probably didn't engage in anything like that because he wasn't someone who joked around in the first place. Now, of course, there were lots of us, maybe about 25 or so teachers at that school. But as far as I know, I don't know if anything was going on or not. Is the best way I can say it.
Okay. Okay, let me, going to ask Stephanie, since she's in the school system now. Stephanie, do you ever hear anybody joking around in your break room at lunch or anything? When a cluster of educators are standing together, is anything said or done that you think is inappropriate?
I'm kind of like Mother Evelyn. I think the conversations are a little different at school. Like we're so focused on students and what happened that day and what a kid needs. So I'm gonna say where I work now, I have not experienced that conversation. But I will say that I have experienced it, even as an educator. And I think for me, it was more or less like I did speak up. I, told the individual, I let them know, hey, you got one more time, buddy. And we're going to be taking this to another place and making sure it's handled. Of course, I wasn't going to beat him up or anything, but I mean, I was going to make sure that someone higher up knew what was happening. So, I have experienced it even as an educator. And I can remember some experiences working during my work study as a college student and working in a gym. I definitely, had those moments where, it was sexual harassment, but I'm kind of like Mother Evelyn as a young college student. I don't think I was educated enough or even felt empowered enough to say something. Where now, as an adult, I would definitely, if that conversation came up or I felt that I was being harassed, I would definitely say something now.
For sure. I remember being sexually harassed by a boss when I was, probably was about 22, 23. I was in management for a fast food company. And at the time, I was taking a year between college and graduate school. So I worked there and the guy said a couple of inappropriate comments. And, back then I was young. I didn't know a whole bunch about sexual harassment. I just knew his comments were inappropriate. And I ended up quitting the job at some point shortly after that, instead of, I wish I knew then what I know now. I definitely would have, addressed it with him, gone higher up if I needed to, but I ended up just quitting. So let me ask Vernon, what do you, back to my original question, what do you think about people coming forth, women or men coming forth, years later with these allegations?
Well, as Mother Evelyn has said, and as Stephanie has also said, I think that when you're younger, you're sort of reluctant because you're not necessarily trying to rock the boat. Unfortunately, people take advantage of that, male and female. And one of the things that Stephanie said about not really being educated, cognizant as to, is this sexual harassment? And I'm sort of like, yeah, I mean, I unfortunately, a lot of the old allegations, I believe them. I absolutely, because the culture was such, and even to some degree today, it's not as public, but it's like, the locker room kind of crap. And I mean, being a former athlete, high school and college, you talk stupidly, but it's that kind of testosterone driven, you know, and I'm gonna just say this, and she's gonna, and even if she doesn't, because I can exert this force, or I'm the boss, so she's gonna comply, blah blah blah. And as I told you, Vicky, at one point in my first job, I ended up being, I was a lead in a call center with a predominant population of women, a few guys, but mostly women. So I actually was sent to sexual harassment training by my company, and was trained by the HR people to sort of understand what sexual harassment was in terms of those unwanted advances. And that was one of the things back then that was interesting, because it's like, definition wise, it's like, one person's sexual harassment, depending, it sort of kind of also depended on who was actually doing it. Is this person, very honestly, lots of people dated within work, and just depending on who the person was that made the comments, it'd be like, oh, that's so cute. But if they liked them, but if they didn't like them, then it's like, well, that made me feel uncomfortable. So it's like a double-edged sword. I very honestly believe most of the allegations, Clarence Thomas definitely, because he's, we're not even going to discuss him, but, Governor Cuomo, yeah. Just, it's a power thing. It's that whole, I'm powerful, and pardon my wording, but white male hegemony sort of preaches and teaches that, and chauvinism, and that's, I'm gonna try to keep it real. What I think one of the most powerful examples of that whole sexual harassment, chauvinism, male hegemony I've seen has been in the Black church, emulating what's done in corporate. Some of the stuff I've heard from men of God in terms of women and their place. And it's like, really? Okay, but the word says, but yeah, I really, it's, unfortunately, you're scared, people are scared and reluctant, whether it's sexual harassment, even racial harassment, because you're like, I'm trying to maintain, I'm trying to not to rock the boat. I want to keep my job, because I don't want to get branded as a troublemaker. And a lot of times that's what happens, because I'm a troublemaker. I've been a troublemaker in a few places, but and sometimes being a troublemaker, you're lonely and you're isolated, because corporations do know how, most corporate HR people are working toward the interests of the corporation and not the individual employee. I mean, that reality, that's fact. That's one of the first things I learned in my first little corporate job. But yeah, and I hope I answered the question as well.
Oh, you did. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Crystal, I'm getting to you in a minute. So I have a specific question for you. Let me ask Eleazar, What do you think about women or men coming forward 20 years later, 8 years later with these allegations? Are they believable to you?
No, I mean, I think I agree with everyone else who's been speaking this night. I mean, I think they're believable. I'll believe what they come forward to say. I mean, as other people have mentioned, I mean, different times, you know, maybe it's because they were in vulnerable positions. Maybe, you know, as somebody mentioned, people who are doing the harassing are in position of power. I mean, how do you stand up to that? And so how do you speak up to that? And so maybe you're not in a place where you can speak up, right? And so you get to a point where you can speak up, and especially now that we've come to a place in society where we are encouraging people to come forward. We're encouraging people to speak up. We're encouraging people not to stay in the shadows, but to come up and say, hey, this is my story. This is what happened to me. And so if we're telling people, hey, do this, and then when they come out and we say, we don't believe you, then we're leaving them hanging. And so, no, I mean, I truly believe what these people are saying is things that truly do happen. I think like Vernon said, I mean, it you know, me being clergy, it certainly can happen in the church. And that's why I think a lot of times we have special training for clergy so that we can be made aware that clergy are in positions of power, that clergy have power over people, and that we can really get away with a lot of things if we want to, if we're not careful, and we can be put in positions and where we can normalize certain behaviors that are not proper or not correct. And so yes, I would say, hey, if something happened to you, please speak up. There are people out there that will listen to you, that will stand with you.
Okay, Eliezer, since Vernon brought up the church and you just mentioned it, let me throw out a scenario to you. If do you have paid employees at your church? I mean, you're a pastor of 2 churches, right?
No, just one church, but I do have some employees out there.
Okay, do you have male and female
Yes.
employees? Okay, so here's my scenario. If one of your employees came to you reporting some sexual harassment that happened, how would you handle it? How would you get it investigated, or do you have to go to your district superintendent to handle it, or would you handle it?
Yeah, I think we have actual guidelines as to how to handle that. I mean, the first thing is to go to my staff parish relations committee and report that, and we'll probably definitely have to get the DS involved. And so, I mean, it's not something that we can sweep under the rug anymore. I mean, we have to let certain people know about what's happening. Especially, I mean, even, you know, with church being involved, I mean, we're not even talking about employees now. I mean, we're just talking about church members too. If something happens with church people, and now we're dealing with children and teenagers, something happens there, then, I mean, authorities have to be notified immediately. I mean, we don't have a choice, or we'll get charged with that. So, I mean, there's certain guidelines that need to take place. And so, yeah, I mean, if anybody were to come to me with something like that, I mean, immediate action will be taking place. It's not something that we, at least in the United Methodist Church, not something that we play around with.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I want to read a couple definitions, and give some examples, and give a couple of statistics, and then I'm going to turn it over to Crystal for a while. She is a long time human resources strategist, you know, professional. So I definitely want you all to get her expertise. I wanted to give the definition of sexual harassment. Sexual harassment in the workplace is defined as unwelcome or unwanted verbal or physical contact that's sexual in nature and can negatively affect the victim's employment status or quality of life. Some examples I found online dealing with sexual harassment are these: doing sexual favors, making sexual advances, making comments that are crude, completing or attempting non-consensual sexual acts, telling sexual jokes, threatening sexual violence. I'm assuming they mean like rape or something like that. Another one is abusive sexual contact. And the last one I saw was sexual photos, images. When people are engaging in sexual harassment, the harassers are making the victims feel, these are some feelings I read about: uncomfortable, unwanted, unwelcome, embarrassed, shamed. And here are some statistics. I found this online, and it was, it's not really an article, just it says facts about workplace sexual harassment. And some of the statistics are from 2019. So I'm going to assume this was, reported, all of this was reported in 2019. It said that about 54% of women report workplace harassment. Fewer than 1 in 5 companies have taken steps to discuss appropriate conduct, hold trainings, or update sexual harassment policies, even after, even after the Me Too movement, Time's Up movement, even after those movements have surfaced in fairly recent years. So again, fewer than 1 in 5 companies have taken steps to discuss this, to update their policies and everything. So that's concerning. A poll was done. I don't know who the population was, but it said that 19% of adults claim to have been sexually harassed at work. Of those 19%, 10% of those were men, 27% were women. And then this last statistic says around 90% of employees who experience sexual harassment at work never file a complaint, while 75% never complain to their employers. That last statistic that I read really bothers me, because that means that if people aren't reporting these incidents, that means that these harassers continue their behavior for years, and then they perhaps are, moving from company to company doing this. So I just wanted to read those things. And now I wanted to ask Crystal, as a longtime HR strategist, consultant, management person, professional, how can employers encourage employees to come forward with these allegations right away instead of years later? What policies and procedures should be put in place or should have already been in place to make employees feel comfortable?
Oh, well, I feel like that's a loaded question. I mean, I can share a lot, and hopefully I'll stay on track. But if I could kind of dovetail it with, the last question about, when claims come to light years later. Well, when we're dealing with, sexual harassment, there can be trauma associated with it. And also just the awareness may not have been there at the time when the incident happened. So, with things coming to light later, I do not think that it makes the claim any less valid, right? And so I think, that's really important to understand that depending on the nature of it, the severity, as well as the context in which it occurs, it may not, the person who's experienced it may not be in a place where they feel comfortable or even can verbalize, what it is that's happening to me at this particular time. So I think that's just something to kind of keep in mind and understand with the nature of, maybe the full spectrum of what could occur in, a workplace that would constitute sexual harassment. So that's the first thing. Now, in regards to organizations, as an HR professional, I feel that my role is not only to, look out for the company's best interest, but to be an employee advocate. And to be an employee advocate and to do that well, it requires understanding, we should have policies in place. If you have an employee, you need to have an employee handbook, right? And outlining specific policies, one of which is a sexual harassment policy. What constitutes sexual harassment? You know, if a complaint needs to be reported, what are the steps, as well as the steps for investigating and coming to a resolution. That needs to be documented, and it needs to be shared with your employees. Leadership needs to be aligned and understanding these expectations are for everyone in the organization. Nobody is exempt. And it will also be enforced without any partiality in regards to that. Because, you know, as many people have already shared, oftentimes, I mean, there is this power dynamic at play. And so understanding me, I take it very seriously. It doesn't matter who is making the claim or who it's against, it's going to get the same type of time, attention, and importance and urgency, you know, that any would. And I think that's important. So not all organizations, one, have HR professionals on staff. So, you know, that can impact how the organization goes about, you know, maintaining a safe workplace, but also, you know, some organizations, because the culture may be eroded to such a place where even if you have an HR person who has that type of like commitment to the employees, they may be almost powerless because of just the power structure that exists there. So, I mean, that's something to consider, but that my view is it's my job to take this seriously. And if it's reported, or even I try to, you know, even keep an eye out for things, but if it's reported, I'm going to do you know, my job in order to investigate it and getting the right people involved. Sorry. I also think it's important that if you have a policy in place, you need to do the training, right? There's leadership training, and then there's training for everyone as well. And so when I started my HR career, we did this annually, and it can become like, oh, you know, here comes HR again talking about, you know, workplace harassment. But, you know, I think it's important to have it as part of the culture, you know, that we do training on this consistently, and that we also back up what we say with the way that we investigate, the way that we engage with one another, and the way that we just maintain a culture within our workplace that allows people to thrive and feel safe and to do their best work with, you know, within a team that supports them. One other thing I would say is I do, as a consultant, I do work with organizations that have, one in particular, we have seasonal employees that are high school and college age students. And it does take also being very explicit. You know, this is what sexual harassment looks like. And sharing that, you know, who the right people are to talk to, and also ensuring, you know, I put myself out there, even if you have questions, if it just didn't feel right and you just need to talk about it, then, you know, please come to me so we can talk through this. Or, you know, with our reporting relationships, sometimes it may be with a coworker, you know, a peer. Sometimes it may be within that reporting relationship, and knowing that HR should be, you know, your advocate where you can go and talk with them and share those particular concerns. I do think that it's important that we're very clear that sexual harassment can be initiated, you know, from any side, and it can occur to, you know, both men and women. And I think I mentioned, I try, especially in the environment where we have high school and college age students, I try to keep an eye out for it. I mean, sometimes it's like playful, it's seen as playful banter, and I can almost see when it's about to go wrong. And so I try to keep an eye out and say, okay, let's bring it back together. And oftentimes they hang out outside of work, and sexual harassment can happen outside of work, you know, and understanding that, what you guys are doing on the weekend can impact how you show up in the work environment Monday through Friday. And, I also just try to keep an eye on that. And I don't want to be, like big bad HR, but at the same time, understanding like, lines can get crossed very easily. And if we're not careful, just kind of keeping an eye out for it. I can see things that maybe other people can't see because of just being in that environment for a number of years and understanding just how things escalate. Sometimes without the intention, and other times, the person clearly has an intention and they're just working their way to that point. So I try to keep an eye out for that too. So hopefully that helps.
Yes, it does. It does. Anybody have any comments based on what Crystal just shared with us? Again, she's an HR professional, so she has had quite a bit of experience. Anybody have any responses to her knowledge she just shared with us? Knowledge and expertise? Okay.
Well, if no one else has anything, I would say, like, for anyone, if if it doesn't feel right, I would question that, right? And it is really difficult, especially if you are, in a position. I liked how Eleazar mentioned it, like in a vulnerable position, either because, this is coming from a supervisor or boss, or maybe you're new to the position, or, you're really just eager to like make your mark in this organization. But if something doesn't seem right, I would say inquire and question it. And there was actually a comment on Facebook a couple minutes ago in regards to, it was Jamin Bryant Heron who said, I can't say I've experienced harassment as a biracial hetero male, but I would say I've witnessed it and have called it out. And I think that's really important for us to be vigilant. Like, it may not be happening to me, but if I see something that I know isn't right, I should be able to call the person out or bring it to the attention of the people that need to know it. So because, some people, some people just aren't necessarily going to, know how to navigate those areas if they're experiencing it themselves. But if I know that it's wrong, I feel like I have a responsibility to be like, if it's a comment, like, we don't do that here. We don't do that. It was interesting. Sorry, I will get off in just a moment and let someone else speak.
No,
But
that's fine.
It was interesting. I remember I was in a work situation, and it wasn't sexual harassment, but it was becoming a hostile environment. And I thought it was just me, right? Like, I'm like, maybe I'm just too sensitive about it. It might just be me. And we were in a meeting and my colleague called it out. And I'm like, thank you. And afterwards we had a conversation and I'm like, it was so important to know that I wasn't making this up, that it wasn't all in my head, that someone else saw it and they called it out. And it helped me understand, like, what, I probably didn't need to kind of like question myself, really trusting that I knew what was going on. And it wasn't just me being overly sensitive, but it was so helpful knowing someone else saw it too. And I'm not crazy. So, you calling it out can actually help uncover it and bring it to light so that something can be done about it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for your expertise and knowledge, Krista. Let me mention two types of sexual harassment claims. Krista used the word hostile, so these are the two types. The first one is quid pro quo, and this means requesting sexual favors in exchange for a benefit, like a promotion or avoidance of punishment, like somebody about to get demoted. So that's the first type, quid pro quo. And then the second type is what Crystal just referenced, hostile work environment. And it says, this is sexual harassment that cultivates a demeaning work environment for an individual And actually, it could affect the entire group. Like Crystal just said, you know, she and someone else actually noticed that this isn't right. This environment's not right. Some examples include stereotypical remarks or crude jokes regarding sex and gender. So those are the two types: quid pro quo, hostile work environment. Has anybody experienced anything based on those two types of sexual harassment claims? Anybody on here, any panelists experienced anything? I think Stephanie mentioned something and she addressed it immediately with that employee. What if that employee had kept doing it? Would you have gone to, I don't know, who would you go to, the principal at your school? Or who would be the next person to, or who would be the person to report it to?
Right. You know, and I actually, now that we're talking about this topic, being in education, it really is, to me, it's different. I guess when we're talking about harassment and how is it addressed, different job settings, I feel like it's going to be different. But it should be the same across the board. Because when I think about it, we're going back to the idea of training. So do I have the training to know who to go to if I experience sexual harassment at school? My guess is that I'm going to go to my principal first. But then what happens after that, I'm not sure. And that's, you know, and that's just me being very honest. Someone else might have read that handbook word for word, and they might know exactly where we're supposed to go. But for me, I would, if I experienced it, I would go to my principal, whoever I'm most comfortable speaking to. We have a head of school, we have our principal, we have 3 assistant principals. So I would go to the one that I'm most comfortable talking to and process that situation with them.
Okay, thank you. What, Eleazar, what about you? If somebody sexually harassed you, who would you go to? I know you talked about if an employee came to you, but if something happened to you, what would be your course of action?
Right. Well, for me, I would rely on my DS. I don't know who else I would go to if I were dealing with something, you know, because of how the organization is set. So I would have to rely on him, or just go directly to the bishop and speak to them. Those would, yeah. Other than that, I really wouldn't know who else to speak to.
Okay. I was just thinking about even, you know, outside of your church that you're pastoring, if you were at a meeting, a district meeting, or I'm sure you all have quarterly meetings and things like that. If another, let's say a female pastor said something to you, then I guess you might go to your, well, I guess it would be the same, district superintendent or your bishop.
Yeah, definitely to those, and I mean, I could go to my group of pastor colleagues that we meet together, and we can, you know, support her or him however best we possibly could at that moment.
Okay. I want to ask Crystal a question, and then I'll get back to you, Vernon, and Mother Evelyn. Crystal, so, you know, I thought about this earlier. I've been an intern before. Actually, I've been an intern and extern over the years at various corporations or just business entities, I should say. They weren't necessarily for-profit corporations, but you know, I'm wondering if someone is a non-paid intern and they have an issue. I mean, something actually happened to me. I was a non-paid intern at a government entity. I was sexually harassed by someone who was going through the same program as me. And then I mentioned it to my supervisor and she kind of laughed it off. She didn't necessarily believe me because I didn't go to, she said, oh, well, you didn't report it to Human Resources, but I was not an employee for them. So So what is the recourse for someone who is an intern, a non-paid intern or extern, if something happens to them?
Yeah, so typically, like in your particular case, like I would assume that there was like some supervising organization. So like you were doing this through your chaplaincy program, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, when there are interns who are like associated with a college program or some other entity, then I would say being able to use those channels to support and like bring in a concern, and they should be the ones to help kind of facilitate, what happens in the conversations that need to happen like within the work environment that you are located in, but also like from a because I work a lot with small business owners and helping them think about the strategy around their HR. So I would say like on the business owner side, if you're bringing interns into anyone unpaid into your business, you should have guidelines and structures around that too. And so of course, your employee handbook is not going to relate to them, but you would have some guidelines and structures in place because whether it's a volunteer, an employee, an independent contractor, or even a partner, that you might have a relationship with, you'd want to ensure that you are providing the type of environment that is safe and conducive for all that you're engaging with. And whether the harassment comes from someone who isn't associated with your business, like, if it's a partner who comes in and perhaps harasses one of your employees, or if an intern comes in and harasses, like either way that it goes, you would want to have like clear guidelines in place in regards to how do we handle these type of concerns, so that I would say you want your culture overall to really be firm and committed to this. And so thinking about all the ways that you interact with people, even your customers, like there are certain things that we aren't going to tolerate from our customers, right? And if this happens, that there is a way for us to be able to address it. It'll be slightly different, but it still needs to be addressed and handled. So unfortunately, and it sounds like that structure wasn't necessarily in place, or that intentionality. And as you mentioned, what was the statistic? Maybe one, I don't know. You had said some statistic, which was like, I'm like, I know that's true. In regards to maybe training and policies, less than 1 in 5 have, training and policies in place. And that, I know that's true. But it behooves us, and I'm talking to business owners right now, and church leaders and nonprofit leaders. It behooves us to be intentional about what these things are, so that one, we're creating the culture that we want to see, and also it helps protect us, from liability. So that's what I have to say about that.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, it makes sense to have policies in place, the employee handbook in place and everything, but it also makes sense for employees to actually know exactly where to go. I was trying to figure out, I work for a huge health conglomerate, and I was like, okay, I know I went through employee orientation a little over a year ago. I was like, well, now where can I find? I didn't get a hard copy from what I remember. So I'm like, where do I go to find out, the sexual harassment policy, or just anything I want to know? And then I Googled it. I'm off today, so I was at home. I Googled on my phone, I put in the company name and sexual harassment policy, and it didn't clearly come up. So if somebody else were really in a situation and really needed that information, it needs to be readily available. They need to know exactly where to go. There should be a handbook or something where they know, with the table of contents. Okay, sexual harassment policy, it's on page 60. Okay. Or even if it's online, you still would have a page number or some kind of marker to know where to go to find out information. Who do I report this to? How do I handle it? So,
And Vicki, I'm not going to be naive and think that, our employees read the employee handbook and are, well versed in it. So what I would also say, yes,
well,
knowing where to find it when you need it, but also understanding who in your organization is like an advocate. So even if I don't know like the right chain of command, if there's someone I know I can go to and share this concern with, perhaps they can help me navigate how to get this into the official like reporting structure, right? So I would say don't let that hold you back. If there is a concern, you find a way to be able to share it. And it'll come. But like, yeah, I don't think, most of us have the employee handbook, memorized and know where to go, or even sometimes don't even know where to find it when we need it. So that's what I say about that.
Okay. I have, let's see, I mentioned the two types of sexual harassment claims. So I found this online: to eliminate a hostile work environment. For any of us who have businesses or might want to start one, this is helpful information. To eliminate a hostile work environment, value your employees, promote open communication, implement recognition programs where people are getting awards for different things, make work fun, that always helps, and then build an environment of trust. So I just wanted to mention those things. Does anybody, let's see, Vernon or Mother Evelyn, do you have anything to say at this point? You've been listening to Crystal talk a lot about, sharing her HR expertise with us. I want to make sure everybody has a chance to talk. I think I have a few more questions, but do either one of y'all have any comments based on what you've heard?
Well, it's wonderful to hear Crystal, who has so much experience and information. I'm wondering though about the corporate environment where certain things have been traditional over the years and so forth. How do you be an advocate for someone who is going through problems and they are afraid because they're wondering if they're going to be able to keep their job and that sort of thing? It seems to me that there is a culture of exploring options, maybe, that could be a part of what's going on in this generation. I don't know if I'm making myself clear enough about what I'm trying to get at, but you have the different generations in the workforce, and especially in the corporate sector. So if you have someone who is knowledgeable, who can help you work through whatever it is that you're experiencing, that could be a very helpful part of sexual harassment that needs to be addressed.
Well, if I could, on Facebook, there was a great comment from Courtney Sue, who shared like having a diverse leadership team and a formal peer advocate process can be helpful. And so, I mean, that is one strategy that definitely, if a large corporation is thinking about how can we change our culture, there are some changes that can be made. But if we don't even realize that we have a problem, and there are individuals who may not have may fear repercussions or may not have the comfort level of sharing out, it's easier to say than do, to speak up. But I would say find a trusted person within the organization that you can speak with, who can help be an advocate and bring about change. Change is going to be it's usually slow and hard, but it's not going to happen if we don't say anything, right? So those are things I would say. I mean, within an organization, and especially, where we hear about, things that have been going on for years in corporations, where it's just become like, this is the way we do things, or, that's just the way he is. Like, I stay away from him, but we don't call him out or call her out on, the things that is being done. So, when we're in cultures and workplaces where this type of inappropriate behavior thrives, it does take kind of drawing that line in the sand and being like, this is not right, and working for the change that's necessary. It's easier to say than to actually have to be the person to do, but I do think it's possible and it's necessary in order for it to change.
Okay. Thank you, Crystal. Thank you for the question, Mother Evelyn. Stephanie, I wanted to ask you something. Okay, so you're a school counselor. So and I always forget which grades do you work with?
Actually, I work in a school that's K through 12. So I'm pretty much responsible for, anybody that is a part of our community, they can reach out to myself. I also have another co-counselor with me. So it's two of us for the whole school.
Okay, so I don't know about an elementary school, but let's say a middle schooler or a high schooler came to you and was mentioning some wording that sounded like sexual harassment by another student or by a few students. I mean, how would you get those students together in your office and then call in their parents and have a meeting, or how would you handle something like that?
So the couple of situations that I've been involved in, it's been, you talk to the individual who is experiencing the harassment, so you can kind of create that narrative and you know how to support that individual. And then we also speak to the other person. We've had some issues like the dating type issues is what I'm thinking about. We've had where, the young lady is dating the young man, and the young man is, just very controlling and almost at that point of being abusive. The experience that I had, we kind of tag teamed. So I spoke with one of the individuals, the other counselor spoke with the other individual, again, just trying to create that narrative. We did have to speak to parents about what was happening. And then of course our admin team was made aware of the situation. So sometimes you have to, we're concerned about confidentiality, but at any point in time where we feel a student is in danger of harming themselves, harming someone else, or if we believe that they are being harmed, we are, ethically obligated to speak up. And so it kind of goes back to what Crystal was saying earlier about being the advocate for for our students. And it's the same way if an employee came to me, because I do wear that umbrella of confidentiality. If an employee came and I was that trusted person, I would do the same thing, process with them, what happened? How did it make you feel? What do you think is, what do you think is best as far as, what do you want to do as far as the next step? And then going from there. So yeah, I think from a counselor point of view, yes, I have, been a part of those really tough conversations with individuals. Sometimes students come to us and say, hey, so-and-so's in this bad situation. So yeah, that's kind of where we go from a counselor perspective.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, I thought about that. What about when minors are involved in these types of cases?
And I think what's interesting is in my head, I know what to do if someone came to me, but it's really weird to think that if I was the person experiencing it, I'm like, where would I go? Who would I talk to? So You know, just that difference. I know for me now, just having this conversation, I know that I need to be more aware and more, you know, intentional about, from an employee perspective, you know, what do I do as an employee? So yeah.
Yes, yes. And I mean, as a chaplain in the hospital, I need to find out exactly where, you know, where our sexual harassment policy is, as well as
Right.
other policies. I just
Yeah,
like,
it's weird.
I
Like
know
you
I
think
was
about
taught
it.
them.
Yeah, you think, you know, I know what to do if there's a fire drill. I know exactly where to go. You know, we do first aid and CPR training. So most people know this step, that step. If you ask somebody, what do you do if you're being sexually harassed? So many of us would say, I don't know. I don't know who I would go to or talk to. So we definitely need to do better about having those conversations across the board.
For sure. You know, like I mentioned when we first got started, there have been so many cases now. You know, I'm sure there are, you know, numerous ones. We're only hearing about the ones of, you know, involving the public figures, the entertainers, you know, the newscasters, the you know, our former president, you know, people who are in high profile jobs. You know, so just imagine at places where we work, it's probably prevalent all over I mean, not probably, I read statistics, we know it's prevalent. So yes, we need to know how to handle it. Let me ask Eleazar, Vernon had to drop off of the live. Eleazar, I know you've talked about how you would handle the sexual harassment if somebody came to you in your congregation, or if it happened to you. Do you know if, I mean, in your church office, do you guys have a handbook where there might be a, like a, what am I trying to say? Like a sexual harassment document form where you would document something and then, you know, pass it on to your supervisor? Is there a form you fill out or some kind of wording or specific questions you would have to ask?
Yeah, we actually do. It's called safe sanctuaries policy. And
Okay.
so, I mean, there's forms there and that we fill out, you know, questions that we need to ask authorities, that if we need to get the authorities involved, then who do we need to call? And so there's a list of guidelines of what we need to do. And so that saves me a lot of trouble because I just have to follow it. And that keeps me, you know, keeps me and the church out of trouble as well. As long as we follow those guidelines.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Okay, that's great. There's something that in place and you know exactly where to go to find it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's great. I have, let's see, I wrote out some, I guess these would be steps if someone were going to, or experiencing sexual harassment as a victim. This is what I found out on, you know, I do a lot of researching and Googling, investigating. So this is how to handle sexual harassment. If you're the victim, document the incidents. I mean, usually it's not just a one-time incident. It could occur over some days, weeks, months. Some harassment lasts for years. So document these incidents. And they suggest backing up the evidence, like texts, if someone is, the abuser or harasser is texting you or emailing you, or, you know, sending you picture texts, anything like that. Make sure you keep those, as well as somehow back them up on your phone or computer, wherever. It also says report the incident or incidents, plural, to management. If nothing is done, if management ignores these complaints you come forward with, file a complaint with a civil rights organization or agency like EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And then you can contact an attorney, and you would be suing the harasser, but also you can sue the employer if the employer was notified by you that the harassment was going on and they chose to ignore it. You can sue both the harasser and the employer. And also, let's see, it's about 9:40. I just wanted to mention the elements of a sexual harassment claim. This was actually one of my majors in law school. I've been out of law school for 18 years, so it's not as familiar to me, but one of my majors concentrations was constitutional law and civil rights. So I used to know this like the back of my hand. But anyway, so I Googled it today. So under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, these are the 4 elements that an attorney would have to prove if someone were being harassed. So it requires that a plaintiff, the victim basically, would have to demonstrate that, number 1, the work environment was objectively and subjectively offensive. The second one is harassment was experienced based on gender. And the third one is conduct was so severe, pervasive, that a hostile environment was created. That's what Crystal was talking about earlier, hostile environment. And then the fourth element is there is a basis for employer liability. So again, that's, the employer has a responsibility to protect its employees. And if it ignores, if the employer, the people higher up, upper management or human resources, if they ignore these sexual harassment claims that are going, scenarios that are going on in their corporations, nonprofits, wherever, federal government entities, wherever it is, that if they are liable, that's this fourth element here. So I just wanted to read those for everybody, not just panelists, but for all viewers. Just know that you are allowed to file a sexual harassment claim. So I just gave you the elements that your attorney would have to prove on your behalf. So does anybody have any other comments or questions? We have about 17 more minutes.
I think there's a question for me from Courtney that she posted on Facebook, and she asked, what point are you required to report to law enforcement? So for us as school counselors, we actually go through, we report to DSS first, and DSS will, if it's significant, DSS will tell us to also call the police. Sometimes DSS will take our report and call the police. So it's kind of like a collaboration. So if we ever have a situation that comes up that is significant, or I don't even know if significant is the right word, but the word severe is what sticks in my head. But, if anything comes up and, it's necessary to call law enforcement, we report to DSS, and then we go from there.
Okay, so that was a question in the comments?
Yes, off of Facebook Live,
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Now I always forget to tell people to share this on your Facebook page as viewers as well as panelists. Even if someone didn't join us at 8:30, you can still listen to it. We're almost finished, but you can still listen to it, save it on your pages, share it. People can listen. We want to get the word out about the topics we're discussing. I mean, this is a very important topic, sexual harassment. So does anybody else have any comments, or Crystal, do you have anything to add? I know we've talked about a lot. I think we've given some great information. So I want to see if anybody else has anything else to say about it that we have not covered that people need to know.
I would just reemphasize, like one of the big things that I'm a supporter of is, workplace environments that allow employees to thrive. And so you have mentioned before, like some of the aspects of, great workplace environments with trust and respect. And I think, if we're able to orient to those things and kind of be a values led. So if I'm the leader, being a values-led leader. If I'm an employee, really like seeing how does my organization live out these values, and again, if something just doesn't seem right, taking note of that. And I think it's important that, there are going to be times where, where it may go just a little too far, or it's like, kind of call things into question. I think that's a perfect opportunity to be able to say, we may have misstepped this, acknowledging what has occurred, and then taking the right steps in order to, address the situation, as well as, how do we move forward as a group, as an organization, so that this doesn't happen again. Because, if we're committed, this is not who we are. So how do we ensure that we're working towards a better, way of showing who we are? Also, like from an employee standpoint, it's interesting because I feel like some things show themselves, and it's very subtle, but like some things show themselves early on. So even like during, I deal with small businesses, so it might be a little more apparent there. But even when, like during the interview process, if I see, the engagement between team members, like the banter that goes on, and sometimes they get really informal. I'm like, oh, what's that about? But also the way that they approach and treat one another, can help you understand, is this a place that is really going to support and help me thrive? And then just kind of looking along the way, if there's something that happens that doesn't quite sit right with you, really trust your intuition. I've had to learn that and become more comfortable with my intuition, especially from an HR standpoint. Like, if something doesn't seem right, I'm going to probe a little deeper to figure that out. And usually it's not right. and usually, it's something that needs to be addressed. But those are the only other things that I would say. And, oh, well, one last thing, which I said before, but I want to reemphasize, being an advocate and calling out inappropriate behavior. Especially, if we're in positions, I feel like I'm very much at the point in my career and my point in my life where I have less of a filter than I did before. So I feel much more comfortable, calling things out and really advocating for those who maybe just doesn't know how to navigate, or may not, feel that I have a voice in this space, but offering and lending your voice in those places, it really matters.
Okay, thank you for that advice. Anybody else? Anybody else have any comments? We may end a little early tonight. We'll see. It looks like.
I'd like to say that
Okay.
it's really great to have information like we have received tonight from an expert, and also information about how others have experienced various harassment issues. I think that if we can do more of this kind of thing, we could be helpful in general, because it seems that many individuals have suffered greatly in the workplace. And it's not a good thing for anyone. It's not good for the company or the whatever workplace you're involved in. And of course, it's not good for your own mental health. So getting the word out that it's possible to address situations is a good thing.
Yeah, so, I mean, to me, being sexually harassed and dealing with it for years and just holding everything in, it's just like a child who experiences incest or molestation, where, you're holding it in for a long time. No, it can't possibly be mentally, emotionally healthy to just hold it in and be scared to talk, feel shame, and sometimes not know who to tell. That can't be a good feeling at all. So.
Right, exactly. You raise a good point there. Sexual harassment is traumatizing. And so if we don't learn to talk about it, um, and create an environment where people feel safe, um, the harassment will continue, which is, and people will continue to suffer in silence. And when we're talking about jobs, people need to work. We have bills to pay, we have children to take care of, we got rent, food. So, it's just very sad to think that so many people suffer in silence because they do feel like I can't say anything because I need my job. And then, the person who is, harassing them just gets a free pass. They get to think that this is okay, and it's not okay. It's never okay. So I think the main thing is what Mother Evelyn said. Just the same way that we're raising our voices against racism, we have to start raising our voice against sexual harassment. And a collective voices make more noise, right? So I am one person, but together with other people, we can, if I'm advocating, someone else is advocating, that person who is the victim in the middle is now empowered and now feels like, okay, I'm strong enough to say something now. So I think the advocacy part is key, but also recognizing and knowing that when I feel that little tug and I'm like, I'm not feeling this, like this conversation is not cool, or, don't touch me. I know I'm uncomfortable. I have to say something.
Mhm. That's true. Stephanie, you used a word that I was going to use also, the word empowered. I just think about, we're talking about individuals who may have held this in for, months, years, decades. And so I just think, I guess that's why when one accuser comes forward, then, all of a sudden there are 5 more behind that person. It's like the first person who spoke out empowered the other ones to say, okay, now is my time to speak out. I've held this in long enough. It's time for this abuser to get in trouble for what he or she did. It's gone on too long. So yeah, it is empowering when people start speaking out. So, Eliezer, do you have any closing comments? I want to make sure everybody has a chance to talk. We have about 6 more minutes or so, 5-6 more minutes.
I would just say, this has been a very, very good conversation, and I'm glad that we can have this conversation to maybe encourage other people to come forward if they're experiencing something like this. Don't be afraid. There's people out there that will support you, that will believe you. And I know that if you know people in this group, reach out to us and we'll be there with you as well. So.
Yes, thank you for that, Eliezer. Thank you, everybody. Okay, well, we don't have to stretch this until 10 o'clock. So if nobody else has anything else to say, I'll give everybody one more chance. Does anybody else have any closing comments, encouraging words, or anything?
I just want to thank Crystal for just being so knowledgeable in this area. I know I'm on the panel, but I've learned so much just listening to you, share your experience. So I appreciate you, sharing that information with us.
Yes.
I agree 100%. It's always great to have an expert in the room.
Yes, very much so. I'm glad she joined us, everybody. This is my tech person, my consultant, my event specialist for these online dialogues. And normally she's behind the scenes, but every once in a while she comes out. She appears on screen, and tonight I definitely wanted her to give her expertise and knowledge to share with us, because I knew she was going to have a lot of information for us. So thank you, Crystal. Thank you, everyone. Vernon, even though he dropped off. If you're watching this later, Vernon, thank you for joining us tonight. Eleazar, Stephanie, Mother Hughes, Mother Evelyn, and Crystal, thank you all. Thank you, viewers, for watching. And please share this on your pages. Again, like I said, panelists as well as viewers. People need to hear this information. There could be, you know, some friends, family members, neighbors. Maybe if you're a middle-aged or senior citizen, your adult child might need to hear this. So, and know what to, I mean, we've given some advice, some instructions, some encouragement, empowerment to speak up, speak out. So please share this with anyone you know, everyone you know. Thank you for watching tonight. Thank you again, panelists. Good night.